Hey, it's DDA, and today I want to show you what I believe is the most optimal way to start out your Final Factory game. I've played through the early game a couple too many times now, honestly, but it was really fun to do so, and I do want to show you the results of what I came up with. Now, I want to point out that I'm going to be playing on a standard difficulty, and if you don't want enemies in your game, I've gotten this question quite a few times now, you can actually turn them off. You put them to casual and pacifist. They basically become a non-issue. They won't be attacking you at all. However, I will be playing on the standard difficulty just to make sure that you can actually defend yourself should you choose to keep them active. Now, when you get into the game, if you haven't done so already, make sure you complete the first couple of tutorial things. You can actually just complete them if you're not interested in completing them again. The reason you do want to do this is that you actually get some resource points for that, so this is going to allow you to kind of quick start your game. The other thing you want to do is make yourselves some ore just by right-clicking and holding that on the asteroids, vacuuming all of that up. You're mostly going to need the bauxite as well as the iron, but you do need a little bit of silica to be added in as well. Just be careful that you don't draw too much attention to yourself. Now, to make sure you can actually defend yourself, I recommend that one of the first things you do is building a couple of these bats. You will need, well, let's say 7 or 8 of them. I think 8 is actually the optimal number because you use them in sets of 4 if you want to actually attack anything, so 2 times 4 would be 8. I just like having a couple of extra construction bots. You're going to need at least 2 of those as well, but like I said, I just like having 3. Now, keep in mind that if you press F3, you can actually make them disappear, which makes it a little bit easier to build sometime. Now, just go collect some bauxite and iron, and then we're going to actually get started. In the early game, and actually throughout the entire game as far as I care, you should be non-stop producing buildings in your inventory if you can. Now, you don't need to necessarily stress about it if you are not currently producing anything in particular, but you do want to make sure that you don't hold off on actually creating everything until you actually need it. In order to get started, initially what you want to do is set up at least a bauxite mining facility, something like this. I really like this layout. I've tried a couple of different ones. Basically, you have a mining station over here. Connect that with a connector to the second one. If you put down 2 solar panels, that actually supplies enough power for all of this. And then I like sticking out the cargo hold a little bit like this, because now you can approach it from 3 different directions. It's just a very efficient layout, and you can easily copy this if you want and then stick it next to here. You do need to watch out a little bit where you place them, because if you place them too much to the middle of the asteroid zone, then you're going to run into some issues. So if you want to keep your layouts very nice and clean, what you want to do if you start building it, for example, on the other side, kind of figure out how far away you need to place them. It doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of a visual direction from the asteroid, but you want to find a place where you can go in a vertical direction, in this case, where you see the closest mining station lighting up green. So if I move this out one more step, I believe it's green across the entire line. So I think this is the best place to place these, and then you can have an entire row very neatly organized together. That's only if you care about the aesthetics, doesn't really matter too much, but if you want to keep things nice and neat, that is definitely something you should pay attention to. Then you should build yourself a couple of mining bots like I've done over here to make sure you start automating your production. And as you do that, you will notice that you're going to need a lot of these low density structures as well as plasma engines. And in order to solve that issue, at least make sure you don't have to handcraft a lot of those anymore, I've built a secondary station over here. So as you can see, these are actually not connected. There's just an inserter moving back and forth between these. And this is transferring some of the raw resources into this atomic printer over here with a heat exchanger attached to it, just to make sure it doesn't blow up or stop working. And as you can see, this is now producing my low density structures for me. Now, in order to actually make sure we can automate our mining drone production, we're going to need this third structure over here. This is just a simple assembler, and this is making the plasma engines. Now, there's no rocket science going on here, but it's very tempting to start mining all of that other stuff in a very early stage already. But you're going to need a lot of mining drones in order to do that efficiently, so we might as well focus on getting that up and running first. And of course, that is where this fourth structure comes in. And again, I'm not connecting all of these things, because if you do, you're going to have a lot of structural problems really quick. Let me just show you that just to prove my point. As you can see, if I connect all of this up, this is not going to work. So this is where we need these little tiny bots to transfer things in between. Now remember that if you press Control click on an item or on a structure, you can actually pick up whatever is in there. So that's a very efficient way to gather some resources if you need any. But this fourth structure over here is basically a ship assembler. Now remember that you do actually need to research that, but you should have enough science for that just from completing the basic objectives in the early start of the game. You can actually just click through them and research this instantly, so it shouldn't be a problem. And once you do, you can build the ship assembler and start automating the mining production. Now, as you can see, it's currently not producing anything, but that is because all my miners are actually supplied with mining bots. This means as long as you have this structure up and running, you will never run out of mining bots, at least not in the very early part of the game. We do need to optimize this later on, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, we're going to need a lot of resources to do all the stuff we want. Now, what I would recommend that you do is that you actually copy-paste some of the builds that we already have. So, for example, this one over here, we can copy-paste this entire thing, not having to redesign that at all anymore. This is, again, why you need a couple of these construction bots, because otherwise this is going to take you forever to build. And then, of course, you just need to check what items you still need and then build those accordingly. Now, as you can see, again, we need a lot of these crafted materials for that. And the whole point of reconstructing this same build over again is because now I actually have a build constructing these low density materials for me that I can just grab, and I don't have to handcraft those anymore myself. You don't need to do this with the plasma engines. The plasma engines you kind of only need for the ships early on, and these are already automatically being used. So just to make sure that we actually have the low density structures, we can grab them over here. And you can see I've only had this running for like 20 seconds while I was talking, and I already have 30 of those in my inventory, and now a lot more. So this is going to allow you to be a lot more efficient about handcrafting a lot of stuff. Now, once you've done that, what you can actually do is again copy paste this entire build that we have over here. Now, depends a little bit on how you do the copy pasting. Because of the layout, it's going to not copy this specific solar panel over here. But once you do this, you can actually bring this entire build over here, kind of figure out where you need to place it. Let's start with one. Oh, let's start with one in the middle. Is this a good position? Yeah, I think it is. And then we can make another build like this. Now keep in mind that this will be mining iron, so we do need to swap some of the connectors. And we also need to set this atomic printer not to produce low density structures, but medium density structures. And you're going to need a lot of these. Once you have this one up and running, you will see that the mining bots start flying out of the mining bot constructor that we built over here. And you will get a huge amount of incoming resources really easily. Assuming, of course, you do set the actual connectors to export this stuff to your storage units, because otherwise it's not going to work. Now, as you can see, I've built this twice because, again, medium density structures are being used for, well, pretty much any free thing in every single building in the game almost. So you're going to need a lot of those. And of course, you want to build a similar construct like that for the silica over here as well. And then you're going to add in another one to make the, what are they called, circuits? The AI controller circuits as well. Now, as a basic guiding line for everything you do in this game, I would recommend that if you have a new type of resource that you can actually build, it makes sense to make a specific production line dedicated to producing at least some of that resource. So just from an early game perspective, what I've done over here, I have the medium density structures being produced that I just showed you. I added in a third line, so I have two for the medium density, but I have another line dedicated to making some of these robotic parts. Then over here we have a line dedicated to the low density structures, but also I actually did make another line to allow me to start making some of these plasma engines as well. We'll get to those in a moment. And we have one over here to make the circuit board. So all the basic things and all the second tier things I actually now have in production, and that makes just constructing buildings a lot easier. Now, I just want to make a little sidestep to the end of my previous playthrough, or at least where I ended up stopping that particular playthrough. Because if you've played other factory games, you might be inclined to kind of build a bus with all these different items like I've done over here. Looks great, don't get me wrong, but it's not really efficient. What's also not really needed in this game is building a whole mall, like I've done over here, that is going to be producing all the different buildings and items that you can produce in the game. Not saying that you shouldn't do that. but it's not really efficient, and you also run into some supply issues and logistics issues if you do that, because you need so many resources in order to supply that. There's not really a good way to control how many of a particular building it's going to make. It will at least need to make one stack. You can actually set the cargo holds to limit the supply in some of the areas. I'll actually show you that this with an empty one. So you can see here, normally there's 4 stacks. If you press the middle mouse button, like it said over here, then you can actually lock these so there will only be 1 stack. But that still means that you're going to be constructing a whole stack of buildings, and as you can see, they stack up to 50 in most cases. So this is going to be a huge drain in your resources. And there's actually a lot of work to set this up as well, while you could spend all of that time just handcrafting that stuff and actually progressing through the game. So again, I don't recommend making a bus or a mall. If you want to do that, by all means, it's just not really efficient in this particular game. Alright, so back to the actual playthrough I was just showing you. So, we want to do some science, because we need to unlock all this nice little goody stuff. And in order to do that, we're going to need research. And in order to get research, we're going to need 2 things. We're going to need some of these research stations. Those are really cheap to make, and we are actually now producing all the required components, so this is super easy to do. But we're also going to need a steady supply of the asteroid research bots. These run out, the same as with the mining bots. They do actually run out, so you need to replace them, and you don't want to be handcrafting things that you will need to continually produce. So we're going to continually produce them in an actual building. I've done that over here, so this is where the second line of plasma engines comes in, and we can easily connect that up to the circuit boards over here. Then I'm bringing those into these 2 storage units over here. And then I have 1 ship assembler making the asteroid bots. And then I actually have the connectors connecting this to a secondary one. So this is actually transporting the items through this building. And this is going to be making some bats. These are the defense vessels, or offense vessels if you want, that you are going to need to defend yourself. Once you have that up and running, all you need to do is place down some of those asteroid research stations. I've put down 4 over here. You can do as many as you like, but you don't actually need that many. I would recommend 4 or 5. And as you can see, I now have the research bots flying in. I recommend building these asteroid research stations near a silica asteroid, mostly because you don't actually need that much silica. So that just leaves your open space around the bauxite and iron that you're going to be heavily producing in a later stage of the game, so you're going to want to use all of the real estate around that, and you just don't need as much silica. Okay, so just as a reminder, you do want to be producing buildings non-stop, and by putting that on your bar, you can easily identify which ones you need the most. Now, again, or just control clicking on the stockpiles that you have will easily put a lot of the resources in your inventory like this. As you can see, I have now a couple of hundred all the basic stuff. Let's pick up some robotic parts as well. And as you can see, now I can just say, oh, okay, let's just make a whole bunch of these solar panels. What else do we need? Oh, we actually need a lot of heat exchangers. So let's make a bunch of those. Let's make some mining stations. And then just let's make a little bit of everything, whatever you need and you feel you need the most. Queue things up, start building something. It's actually going to go a lot faster than you think, so you will never really run out of stuff. Just keep an eye on things like connectors and storage units that you might actually use in pretty high quantities, because you always want to start producing those first. Same holds for the solar panels. Everything else, if you have like 10 in your inventory, you're going to be going a long way towards actually being able to build the next build, and then queue up a whole bunch of new ones after that. So now we are mass producing these mining bots, and we have the defense bots in production as well. We can start looking to optimize the production that we already have. And the first thing you want to start optimizing is actually that first line of production that we started out with that turns in the mining bot assembler. What I've done over here is I actually added in a secondary line, and I did connect these directly. You can do this with a bot as well, but there's no need to, because this building is actually small enough to be connected directly. And the reason I've done this is you actually need 2 of these atomic printers working at optimal speed in order to supply 1 assembler making the plasma engine. So this is actually going to double the production of plasma engines, and you can never have enough mining bots. So you just want to make sure that you're not losing more mining bots than you're actually making, because that is going to be a problem really quick. Similarly, I've done this exact same thing in the bottom over here as well, connecting another line of low density production to that secondary assembler as well, because this one is going to be making our asteroid bots, which is not something we need in huge quantities, but we are going to need all the bats we can get, because these things are going to be destroyed by the enemy, at least if you're playing with the enemy active, and you're going to need a lot of them. So you want this to never stop working at all. And as you can see, the next thing I've done is actually research a couple of things. Now we have that under control. The cargo logistics is very useful to have, so it's definitely one of the first things you pick up. But after that, you want to pick up the defense platforms, the exploration, as well as the logistics management. The defense platforms is going to allow you to build something like this. I have a station core in the middle. I attached 4 defense platforms, 1 to each side, and then I also attached an exploration center to that. This is going to be a hefty amount of defense, and as you can see, they're actually attacking someone that got too close, as you can see over here. And this is going to allow you to stay safe. This is going to allow you to defend yourself against a lot of waves of enemies for a pretty long time. And of course, you can always copy and paste this build to make sure you are covered from different angles. Ideally, what you want to do is, if you copy this base, put it in a kind of overlapping area compared to the previous one. That means that these bases can actually support each other in defending, so that makes it very unlikely that you will ever get overrun for a very long time. The reason I pointed out that you should also pick up fleet logistics is because this will allow you to build these shipyards, and you can actually set these shipyards to request specific units, and they will stockpile those units until they're actually needed elsewhere. So for example, you can see I dedicated this one to bats, I dedicated this one to some bats, as well as some asteroid research bots, and then I dedicated this one to mining bots. Now what does this do? This will actually allow you to continuously produce ships. As long as there is space in your shipyard, you will keep producing those ships. So even though, as you can see now, for example, there's actually mining bots flying out to these mining stations over here. But as soon as all the mining stations have their bots, this will keep producing those mining bots and just stockpile them. So there's no time wasted producing the next bot. It will just instantly supply it from this shipyard over here. The same holds, for example, for the bats. So let's say I'm getting attacked over here and some units are destroyed. They will get repopulated. But what I can also do is, if I build a new station like this, then as soon as the first few defense platforms are powered up, as you can see, instantly there's bats being supplied to that and they start populating that. So it's a very easy way to push out your offense towards the edges of your fog, if that is what you want to do. Long story short, is just make sure that your mining ship and bat production is completely optimized and there's no wasted time in between. The next thing you want to start working towards ASAP, even though you have a lot of options and some of these are very tempting, like bat damage, increasing your fleet and stuff like that, but I recommend you start working towards mobile stations. Of course, feel free to pick up some of those faster, easy to collect things as well, but mobile stations is going to be a game changer in the what I would consider actually the mid-game part of the game already. In order to unlock this, you're also going to need to research mass fuel consumer, and you should already have this one available to you because you only need the asteroid science and the ship assembly to do that. Now, these are a little bit more expensive than the other things that might be on your list, but it's worth working towards that. And if you need to spend a little bit of time, you can either expand your factory, of course, but what you should be doing, at least what I think is really good to be doing at this point, is kind of explore the neighborhood around your system a little bit, clear out some of the easier enemies. If you want a larger fleet to go along with you, you can. The first upgrade for your fleet is really cheap, and it allows you to get your own squadron of bats with you. If you find, for example, obelisks like this, you can right-click on those as well. Not super obvious initially, and they will charge up and give you goodies. You can pick up some of these orbs and you can use those later on to buy nice upgrades. The same thing holds for these ancient portals. You can also mine these ones. This will turn them on, and these will actually serve as, well, a portal.
The old masters have left us a device of great power. If only this twisted space could be unraveled, so that we may hop along the stars unhindered. Alas, only the Leviathans offer us such pathways, so we must grow.
Well, that's not entirely true, because you can actually use these to transport yourself across the map to different portals if you find them. Now, I don't have any one of those unlocked, but this one starts out pretty much near the center of your base, and there will almost always be one of those. I haven't actually seen a seed yet that didn't have one of these very close to where you start, so this just makes getting around a little bit easier. Last but not least, you will find some of these comet fragments around, and you can only mine these once. They will give you a small amount of stuff, but specifically what you're looking for is the ice that you get from them, because there is a technology, and I am not entirely sure if I already researched it in the meanwhile. Yeah, I did. The thermal management is an upgrade to the heat exchanger over here. It's very useful, and you actually need a little bit of ice to make that. Now, you're not going to need a huge amount of these early on, but if you just grab a little bit of ice when you're exploring, you're going to be able to maybe build a dozen of these, and that's going to last you a very long time. So make sure you have enough defense platforms and tactical positions that you're not going to be annoyed or seeing your base being destroyed by the enemy. And then it's time to really start scaling up. And I did exactly that over here. As you can see, I built a larger facility connected with a station core. So these things are actually all interconnected. These are 2 lines of miners connected with struts, which is really important because those struts will actually cancel out a lot of the structure loss that you get if you don't use struts. And these feed into 3 of these atomic printers over here. These are all automatically connected with connectors, so there's no bots in between or anything like that. And on the other side, I've mirrored this as well. And then that's all feeding into these cargo holds over here. Now, why did I connect all of this up? Well, first of all, we need to scale things up, so that's really convenient. But because we now have the mobile stations enabled, you will see this thing popping up. We have the movement of stations now enabled. So if I want, I can actually start moving my entire space stations. And I can't stress enough how super useful and super important this is. Now, other than just manually moving them, you can also just land them, and you can kind of set them like, okay, I want this base now to move over here. Why is it not clear? Not entirely sure what the issue is. There we go. And then it's going to get in position. It can rotate, and basically this means that if this asteroid runs out of resources, which it will, you can just take your factory, reposition it near another asteroid, and continue where you left off. Of course, you do need to make sure you actually clear out any enemies around that asteroid, but it does mean that you don't have to tear down your facility and rebuild it somewhere else. You can actually use the designs that you already have. More to the point, you can use this similar design to really make a modular type of interconnecting set of space stations, and I again can't stress enough how cool that is. Let me show you what I mean. So low density production turns into plasma engines, and I've done exactly that over here. So as you can see, I've used this layout for those 4 cargo holds. I mirrored that on the next structure, so this is a separate building again. And now I have 4 of these assemblers making plasma engines. Now this is more or less the equivalent of what these 3 atomic printers can offer in terms of inputs. It's actually not entirely optimized, but that's just because the ratios don't turn out nice enough in order to do that perfectly. And as you can see, I'm also using these radiators over here because you do generate a lot of heat when you are using these assemblers and a lot of these atomic printers. On top of that, I'm also using antimatter power stations, which also generate heat. That is, by the way, the next thing you should be unlocking. I think I forgot to mention that. But this is going to be a massively more efficient way to generate power. The general idea is the same as the solar panels, with the big difference is that you stick them on the side of the building. They are a little bit bigger, so you do need to kind of figure out where you're going to put them. And you connect these tiny little antimatter collectors to the side. Not over there, obviously, but you are going to need to do that on the correct side. And this is going to be producing a huge amount of power. As you can see, this power station is producing 50 kilowatts of power. And if you compare that with what a single solar panel is going to do, it's literally 10 solar panels worth of power. Now, you could kind of optimize this. As you can see, I don't actually need the 3 connectors to the sides in order to supply this particular building with enough power. So you can save a little bit of resources if you want. But this is going to be a hugely more efficient way to build all of your production. Again, this is also why you need the radiators, because one of these radiators is actually taking out a lot more heat, as you can see, 5 Celsius per second, where a single heatsink is only doing 1. So just a radiator upgrade is the equivalent of putting 5 of these heat exchangers on your building. So that's basically going to be a theme throughout the rest of the game. Get those upgraded buildings and replace the ones that you already have, and just make that more efficient. Now, what the awesome thing is about this is that you can say, well, I have this layout and I want this somewhere else. I can reposition this entire factory very easily now and connect, if I want, make a similar layout as this, but producing something else. Not entirely sure what I would be producing in this case, because the only thing that the low density structures turn into without any other resources is actually the plasma engines. But I could connect something else up to this build. So what I can now do is copy this entire build over here. And this is also why I kept it 4 miners wide, because I will be able to put an identical build on every single side of an asteroid like this. So I can massively optimize the building space that I have available by doing it like this in a very easy to use, efficient way. Now, of course, you could make a larger build around the entire, because we do still have some space maybe to connect a miner here and there. But this is already going to drain this asteroid massively fast, and I can use all of those resources to really start scaling up my factory. And I've done exactly that over here. So I'm using one of these mining stations in order to produce these plasma engines. And then I've made a similar layout, and you can use the identical layout just to be efficient. And I'm turning those into the logistics boards over here, as you can see. And now I'm actually adding in a third mobile station that I once again can move around if I want to. And this has 4 ship assemblers into it. Now, these first 2 over here are going to be making mining bots, and they're going to be using this massive supply of plasma engines that I'm getting in to make sure I never run out of mining bots. Because don't underestimate, once you start scaling up massively like this, each one of these builds already has 8 mining stations in it, each using 4 of these mining bots. So there's 32 mining bots per setup like this. And those are going to be running out, so you need to replace them. So you do want to make sure you're going to be mass producing the mining bots even more than you were already. Feels kind of lame, because for now we've not really progressed through any more advanced technology, but just getting your basics up right will massively help you in the late game. The other 2 ship assemblers over here are again making asteroid bots and bats, because again you're going to need many of those, and just very efficient, because all of these ships are using more or less the same resources. So you can make sure that all those resources are not going to go to waste, and you don't make separate setups for those, even though you could do that if you want. Now, if you're playing efficiently, you can set up all of this stuff within an hour of gameplay. Now, honestly, it's not going to be as fast the first time around if you're getting new to the game, but I just want to point out that this is a massive boost to the speed of your game compared to other things that, for example, include building a mall like I showed you earlier. So I hope you found this useful. If you did, make sure you also join me in for the next few of these episodes, because I am going to be exploring the more late game of this game. Because honestly, we're still at the early game, but we've made huge improvements, really efficient ways of getting started. So now we can focus on fun things like laser turrets, station movement programming, which is going to be a tutorial by itself, but it's also going to be super cool. Making this game unique, by the way. So if you've played simulated games, then don't just toss this off as just another Factorio in space kind of thing. It's similar, but it's different, and it's really fun. And as you can see, we have a lot of new stuff to explore as well, but this will give you a very solid base to do exactly that. So if you found this useful, don't forget to like the video. If you're still here, you're awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.